When I say the name Jelena Dokic, what comes to mind? A teenage tennis superstar destined for greatness, or a child who was the victim of ongoing and very public abuse? Both of those things are true. However, Jelena Dokic is also someone who's not only survived what happened to her, but now fearlessly strides into the world with a fortitude that you probably wouldn't expect from someone who lived through what she lived through in such a public way. A woman who's now found her voice and is dedicating her life to helping others who have been through a similar trauma. Jelena is an incredibly inspiring human being. I'm so glad that she is my guest on this episode.
I'm so grateful you wrote this book because, like anything, sport's always about, what's the story behind why we care. I mean, it's ridiculous. So like rugby league, for example, it's ridiculous. These 13 people who are wearing a similar coloured shirt to each other, and those 13 people over there with a different coloured shirt to each other, it's extraordinarily important to both of them that this ball gets over there. And these 80,000 people in the stadium all agree with it. Like, it's ridiculous. And, someone's relationship with their parents or their family, because they grew up loving this team, their emotional state for the day is decided it's completely bonkers. All right. So why we care about sport is so important. With a team, it's a little more difficult. With individual sports, though, the story of the player, of the athlete, really comes into it. Your story is fucking horrible. Man, I watched it play out, on the telly, and, obviously getting ready to chat with you today, going through, what people had an idea. We had an idea about what kind of things were going on, but then when you started opening up about it, it's like, Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, though, it's not an isolated story.
No. It's not an isolated story in tennis. It's not an isolated story in sport, and it's not an isolated story in society. So that's the scary part. And yeah, look, I at the same time I don't want people to feel sorry for me, and I don't want people to feel pity towards me at all. For me, it was all about, in the end, being able to get to a stage where I can have enough strength and courage and belief in myself and my vulnerability that I can come out, that I can tell my story, that it can help someone. But also, I wanted to remove those labels and shame and stigma that are often so associated and big in sport and society when it comes to the way that we view, especially public figures. And it was always like, you got to be perfect. No, any kind of, blemish, let's say, on your record. Silence was golden. But we didn't take care of actually people and human beings and athletes and young people the way that we should. So everyone, I kind of feel like, was scared a lot of the time to even touch anything like an eating disorder or mental health or abuse, because they thought and feared that, their reputation would be ruined, that they would be shamed and stigmatized. And we were always kind of taught for a very long time just to keep quiet. So yeah, I think for me, I always kind of knew that I, at some stage, would tell my story. It was just a matter of when and when I would be ready. And for me, it was always, I've said it, I said at the end of my first book, Unbreakable, that it was telling my story helps one person, it's mission accomplished. So that was my main reason for doing it. I didn't even think about myself in that moment. I didn't know that it would be cathartic for me because it was actually quite draining writing it. But I had no idea just the massive impact that it would have on me personally, that I would find my voice and be this completely different person, or who I always was, but buried deep down with the trauma and the fear and the pressure. But then how much it would change everything that I do and I'm doing now, but also what I want to do for the rest of my life, and the way that it can change tennis and sport and society, and be someone that can maybe be looked at as someone that spoke up and someone that is not afraid to speak up and tackle the hard topics.
You can't be what you can't see. All right. And to see someone who's been through what you've been through, speaking out about what you went through and drawing attention to this kind of control,
Mm.
and abuse in the public eye when there was lots of money to be made, is vitally important. But I've got to say, 2 summers ago, I don't think the people who run the press conferences at the tennis Grand Slams got the memo, because I swear, man, some of those guys, they're all men, put their hand up and here's a player. I don't want to, someone is identified. Listen, man, I'm not really doing great. I'm trying to focus on what I came here for, which is to win this game, but I don't need the bullshit of and these guys. Oh, so you're fucking you're really disappointed in yourself that you're playing so terribly today. And this poor kid, she's like 18 or 19. Just like, guys, man. Like, if you had a message for the some of the press corps, now that you've seen that side of it and you've seen the stakes, and these guys are trying to hold on to their jobs just as much. Not saying they justified them at all. If you had a message for some of those journos, what would you say?
I went through a very hard time. Comes to the media with the way that my father was portrayed, and that's the one thing that I, to this day, still kind of don't understand how that could have happened, because he was so aggressive and he was drunk, doing interviews with the media all the time. And it's one thing to say, okay, but we didn't know what was going on behind closed doors, but yes, okay, but the other thing is that you had an extremely aggressive, drunk person that had an incident every other week where no one called out that bad behavior, and that and even thought, look, Jelena's 16 or 15, her brother's 8 or 7, because my brother was 8 years younger. Should we be concerned that 2 underage kids are going home with this clearly unstable and drunk and aggressive person? So that's what kind of should have been written, instead of, he was actually not just written about, but he was a punchline. He was a joke. And even these kind of like funny drawings were made of him, and all of these things kind of poking fun at the situation. So I talk about that very openly. And when my book came out, the first one, a lot of people and journalists in the media called and apologized, wrote amazing
Really?
articles and columns, and I'm really grateful for that. That was never the reason why I did it, but I think it was nice to see that a lot of people acknowledged that. But my still thing was, we need to do better today.
Yeah.
Would the same thing happen today? That is why I shared my story as well. So I think we need to, just be a little bit kinder with a lot of those things. That's what I try to do, even through my commentary or TV, or when I interview on court. And I never try to say, if someone's playing, you're clearly they're struggling or not playing well. I really never try and go and have a go. I think that's important, because you never know what's going on. Everyone's trying their best. I think it's important to be kind. You're actually doing your best and you just have a bad day. And I think that that's important.
And there's ways to ask those questions.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, like for me, as someone who asks questions sometimes for a job, there's ways to ask the questions to have the person you're talking to reveal the emotion or reveal reasons without you labeling it, but I don't know if sometimes people go for this bitey kind of,
Well,
thing.
the problem was that you would kind of make fun or whatever would get you a headline, but then when you write or should be writing about, I don't know, just an example, abuse in sport, or covering domestic violence or covering mental health or an eating disorder, then we're kind of staying away from it.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think if you got to have the ability to turn it around, tell the tough stories with empathy, but we don't need the questions or something just so that we get a headline. I'll give you an example, and I actually put this into my books. When I was 16, it was my first Wimbledon, the Wimbledon that I made the quarters, and we didn't have very much. I mean, I grew up really, really poor. We were refugees twice, and here I was just qualified for Wimbledon, and we didn't have money, and we stayed in a 3-star motel, just normal motel, and they wrote that we are staying in a brothel. I was 16, my brother was 8. And there's a limit to what you should be allowed to write. And I use some of those examples and some of that stuff. But I think it's important to call it out
Scummy behavior
as well.
Is there, I don't know, enough, like your story, and I think of Britney Spears, I think of Macaulay Culkin, surely the tour makes enough money. Is there somebody on the tour who's, if anybody's under the age of 18, that's their gig? is to just the duty of care among those people?
You get media training, but it's not. It's two
I
very
mean, even just
separate.
like to get between the kid and the coach, or the kid and the parent, or the
Well,
surely,
that's different to the media. So that's
yeah.
that's child protection. So that's different.
Is
So
that a part of
a
it?
lot of work has been done
Yeah.
in kind of the last, let's say, even last 5 years.
Yeah.
The problem you have with a sport like tennis is that it's such a worldwide sport,
Mm.
and every country has its own federation, has its own governing bodies. We are not all under one umbrella. So you have everything from juniors to pros,
Yeah.
different country, 50 different governing bodies for
Wow.
all of these different countries, and different laws as well. So what we have in Australia, for example, we have a good system now in
Yeah.
Australia when it comes to reporting and when
Mhm.
it comes to protecting the younger players, but a lot of the countries don't.
Yeah. Right.
So a lot of the countries don't even have any kind of safety in place or a way to report or how they
Yeah.
deal with it. So that's the problem. A lot of work's been done to try and obviously get that together, but it's hard. It's hard because every time you get to a new country,
Mm.
it's under that federation's
Surely,
umbrella.
like, I mean, I've got to have a blue card to work with kids, right?
Mhm.
When we do TV stuff and there's anybody age of 18, under the age of 18 around, there's somebody on set. Their entire job is like, I don't give a shit what you guys are here to film today. My job is to make sure those kids have this many hours of school today. Da 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 da. But when you're at that end of the tennis tour, you're 15, you're 16 years old, you're still a child. You know, there's potentially millions of dollars at stake of sponsorship
Well,
money.
individual sports are different to team sports
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, exactly,
So
right? There's surely.
it doesn't work the same way.
Come on, man. All right. I'm calling it. Someone make it happen. I don't have a gavel. So I can't imagine what it would be like it would be completely understandable for you've written the first book. That's the story. I feel like you now finally understand what was happening. Tie in a bow in it, put it away. I mean, I can understand like even going out, you're a recognizable person, being in public, people staring at you. That's can be tough when you're, in those kind of states of fragility. What was it that made you want to go out and go, actually, no, I'm going to get back on camera. I'm going to, write some more. I'm going to get back into this.
I don't think it's so much the public aspect of it. I think when I wrote the first book, I really found my voice for the first time as someone who was in a domestic violence-filled home for 15 years and had consequences because of a lot of that trauma and battled anxiety and depression and PTSD and almost took my own life at 22. I kind of felt like I was never really the person who I am deep down. It was all buried under all of that. So for me, writing the first one, that was my life story. That was my memoir, my autobiography. And then the second one was kind of almost, I didn't know I would write the second one. I kind of had an inkling, okay, there's more now to kind of dig deep because I kind of felt like, I'm really only just starting now the healing journey that I've told my story. And I found also a lot of obviously my different purposes in life and what I want my legacy to be. But I never looked at it as being back on camera or being back in the spotlight.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up with it from the age of 11 or 12. So it was nothing new to me, really. It was just these different fields now as a commentator or as a TV personality or being a public speaker or a writer. So it's just in a different way. And this is actually, to be honest, very enjoyable as well. And I get to do all these different things that I never thought that I would. But the reason for the second book is really how I was able to begin healing, why Unbreakable, my first book, was so important, the power of sharing our stories, and the power of not shaming and stigmatizing and judging people, because a lot of people have suffered and even lost their lives and taken their lives because of that fear and that shame and stigma, and continuing to speak up for others that can't. But I also wanted it to be a book about ultimately hope and ultimately belief, and that no matter what you go through, that you can recover and that you can actually not even just recover, that you can come out the other end, that you can thrive. If you told me 10 years ago that I'd be doing the things that I'm doing today, I would have told you you're just, like no way. But that's what pushing the boundaries and pushing yourself and being resilient and just continuing to get outside of your comfort zone, but also that kind of willingness to go, this is my truth. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to share my story. This is my power. Yeah, it can change your life. Finding your voice and actually saying out loud, especially if you're going through things, the possibilities are endless. That's when you really, I feel like, start healing. As long as you're holding things in for one reason or another, you're really suffering. And that's what I really found. So once I was able to open up, which for me was my book, so through writing and words, that's why I feel like what we write, what we say, what we ask, it has so much power. And that's why words are important. What we write and what we say is important. And I've definitely found that through my books and everything that I do today and speak, even through social media. And I hope, and I really work on that every day, but I hope that I have shown that you can turn it into something amazing, something good, something that can help people through just being kind and being nice and not being, for me, it was really important in all of this to not come out as a bitter, resentful and hateful person, because I went through a lot. So I wanted to show that as well. And it would be completely understandable for people that do, and even if I was, but I wanted to, you know what, I really want to go through this with the opposite. So turn the negativity into positivity, the bad into the good, the pain and the suffering into something that will change lives and change minds. So I wanted to just kind of show people that, that positive mindset as well, and constantly believing in yourself and having hope and believing in the light at the end of the tunnel. That it can change things, but never to, I also wanted people to know to never shrink and never be a shell of yourself or a shell of a person because of someone else or because of shame and judgment, whether publicly or whether by family and friends, because that speaks words and volumes about those people. So I want people to know that their voice is so powerful.
Anyone listening to this, the amount of trauma that you've been through, that we are aware of, that you've shared about, is everyone's been through some stuff, but that's like, as they say, that's big T trauma, what you're talking about. So there's people listening who's most definitely had big T trauma in their lives, whether it be when they were quite young or, perhaps more recently. When you started to learn about trauma responses and things like that, what surprised you the most?
I think what surprised me the most is how much we actually keep in and bury deep down, and that it really becomes a part of us. And until you kind of start to get that out, it stays there. But I also kind of discovered that those can be your kind of, I call them battle wounds or scars. And that's okay, they are there, but that doesn't make you weak. It actually shows what you've been through, but come out the other end. So for me, I went through therapy and I got professional help, but I genuinely think if I didn't, I wouldn't be here today.
Oh, yeah. Because it's very difficult to try to process trauma with the same brain that is in a trauma response.
Exactly.
And responding in the patterns of that trauma response. It's just, it's like this.
And I started to actually understand some of the ways that I was feeling, some of my behavior, my eating disorder, for example, as well. Anxiety, depression, PTSD, where all of that came from. But I don't know, there's a lot I was surprised with, because as I was kind of unpacking a lot of it, things were just coming up to the surface. So I really found so much therapy in talking about it and actually going bit by bit and actually realizing, because I blamed myself for a long time. And then I actually realized it's actually not my fault.
Yeah.
Now, also, I don't know, I kind of just realized, look, we're all dealt different cards in life. And it was, okay, this was mine, but it was more, how do I put that in the past that it doesn't define me and defeat me? It shapes me as a person, as, let's say, stronger, wiser, more resilient, but it doesn't define me and defeat me. And for a very long time, I really felt like it was defining who I am.
And that's understandable. Like the kind of abuse that you'd been through, you get why people move to another state, another country, change their name, and that's it. They live this tiny, tiny, tiny life as a way of trying to keep themselves safe, like they're far away from the abuser, but it, you know, is there?
It all depends what you've been through, and everyone's got maybe different things they've gone through. For me, it was a fear of abandonment as well. So I realized as well that I would give people a lot of chances that didn't have my best interest at heart. And I did it because I do try to be nice, and I don't like to cut people off, and I like to give people chances always. But at the same time, was I keeping people around as well because there was this fear of abandonment as
Right.
well, because that's what kind of my family did. I didn't have really a family, right?
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I never really felt accepted or seen, let's say, or like I belonged
Or
anywhere.
safe.
Yeah,
Jesus.
or
Yeah.
safe. So, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of those things
Yeah.
I really, I discovered why I was doing them, and yeah, I really felt like once I started to unpack that, I became a new person. So now I don't also look for validation, for example, external validation in my work. I know that for me, validation doesn't come through work or what I achieve professionally, which for a very long time was the thing that
Yeah.
I felt like was the most important and what defined me. So I
Yeah.
felt like that with tennis, for example.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now it's different. I have a lot of validation, and the way that I think, it has nothing to do with work. Yeah, it's what my passions and
Yeah.
my meaning in life is, and much bigger than, yeah, if I get this gig or what I do here. As much as I
Yeah.
love my work and I find so much passion and love in it, I found that kind of validation's got nothing to do with work as well.
For the kind of work you're talking about and the kind of psychological work that you're talking about, the kind of digging into it, I can understand why people might be reluctant to go back and revisit that stuff. It's a lot.
Yeah.
What would you say about facing it in a supportive environment, working with somebody? What would you say about that, about how frightened you might be to unpack stuff, also stuff that you don't realize is even there and starts to show up? What would you say to people who haven't been trying to seek help or anything because it means going through all that stuff?
Yeah, and look, you don't necessarily have to go through all of it. No one is forcing you to, all of a sudden, you have to talk about all of this. Like for me, I found a great therapist, like I found a great psychiatrist who, yeah, it was very at my pace. And, certain things we didn't even, let's say, fully go into. I kind of felt like I maybe even said more in my book than I did to my psychiatrist, even though he knows everything
Yeah,
I've been
yeah.
through. But it's just the way that you process your emotions, the way that you think. And for me, the biggest thing I was always going into my past, and I couldn't change anything. And for me, I kind of always felt like maybe I could. I was living in the past. And I didn't realize that until I went kind of to therapy and go, well, I've got the whole life ahead of me. It's how I'm going to live from now for the rest of my life. It's not about the past. I've lived that. That's fine. It's traumatic. I've dealt with some of that, and a part of that was also cutting out toxic people and relationships. So I haven't spoken to my father in more than 10 years. Some coaches and some people that were around me that weren't great for me and weren't good to me, same thing, completely stopped. Not just because I've stopped playing tennis, but even they're out of my life. And the day I started doing that, everything changed. But I wouldn't have learned that unless I kind of went to therapy. For example, I always felt like, well, even if someone did something to me and hurt me, if I cut them off, I felt like the bad person. And then, obviously my psychiatrist was like, no, you're just trying to please others. You're not thinking about
Yeah,
yourself.
right, yeah.
You got to be your own priority, but that doesn't make you a bad person. So I actually realized that I had a lot of people in my life because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. So it's so I could go on about it for days and days. I will say this. Yes, look, there was a lot of tears. There was a
Yeah.
lot of, even my book and putting it out on paper. With my first book, I said to my publisher straight away, there's one non-negotiable. I am going to be 100% honest. So whoever's read Unbreakable will know I go into detail with my abuse, what that looked like, what the beatings looked like, what my beatings with the leather belt until I bled looked like, being kicked and punched in the head until I was unconscious looked like. Even things like being a refugee, and
Yeah.
we were lucky if we on the days we had bread to eat. So I really go in depth, and I think that was important. If you're going to do something, I felt like I really needed to do it in full. But what made it possible for me is that I had a supportive environment.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why I like to straight away turn it and go, but we need to create safe spaces and environments for people to be able to do that.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, people are not going to be able to open up and deal with it. If you don't have supportive communities, if you don't have supportive schools, sport, whether it's an individual sport or a team sport, if you don't have these things available, people are going to continue suffering in silence. And just for that reference, you got 9 people that commit suicide every single day in Australia, and more than 1 million people worldwide every single year.
Jesus.
But people suffer in silence.
Yeah.
They really do. And how often do we hear about someone that has taken their life and we go, well, we've had no idea. That's because people are afraid to open up. They're afraid to say, look, I think I need professional help, or afraid to say, look, this is what I'm going through.
Self-stigma stopped me from taking meds for a decade nearly.
Well, how many times have we heard the victim blaming when it comes to domestic violence? How many times have we heard people say, if you go to a psychiatrist, go, like, well, he's crazy. Like, he's ready for the loony bin. No, but these are the terms we used.
Back in the day, yeah.
Didn't we?
Like, well, I'd rather
because
this
those were the labels and the shame and the stigma. And
Yeah.
people, I mean, I know I felt like that back in,
Yeah.
So I still feel like we have a lot of work to do, but that needs to stop.
Yeah.
For any kind of progression that we can make as a society and for individuals, is all of that needs to stop. We need to be very open about our struggles, because by me or you or someone else telling our stories, someone's going to read that.
Yeah.
Someone is going to find comfort in that, help in that,
Yeah.
and go, you know what, my feelings and the way I feel is actually normal.
I learned the word for it. The word is surcease, S-U-R-C-E-A-S-E. That is the feeling of, I really don't want to die. It's the last thing I want to do, but I cannot stand this feeling any longer. There's a word for it. That's how wildly common it is, and it certainly was related to my experience of, like, I did not want to do it, no way, but I couldn't bear another minute with the noise.
That's what I felt like at 22 when for me, it was on a balcony up more than 20 floors up. And
mine too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And I think what actually made me not do it was, like, I actually don't want to do this.
No.
But I felt like, but it's all the pain, blame, everything kind of feeling like I am everybody's problem or everything's because of me would actually stop. Yeah.
I never knew, and this is part of it to me was like why I first started speaking about it, because I never knew how seductive it was. I never knew how, like, come here, mate, I'll make it all better. Come on, I'll make it all quiet. Come on, just come and do this thing. I always thought it was like some scary kind of Freddy Krueger thing. Nah, it was like, I got you, buddy. Chocolate for you. Come over here, just do this thing. It'll be all better. And as soon as I knew that, I was like, God damn, this is as distorted as all the other shit my head's trying to tell me. And I started, just picking up the phone because I knew that my brain was doing some weird stuff.
Yeah, I've been in that situation a few times. And when you start, for me, it's when I start to be okay with going and not having any kind of feeling like I would actually be okay with that. And I felt that a few times for just like 5 seconds.
That's enough.
And then you go, oh, this is no good.
I need a doctor. Yeah.
I am close here. I'm okay with doing this.
Yeah, my brain started to give this as a good idea.
Yeah.
And that for me, it was like, if this is showing up as a good idea, which I know it isn't, my brain's probably not great and I'm seeing the world in a very strange way. I need help. I was very lucky, very, very lucky about that. Isn't it interesting how you think you're doing fine and as the challenges of your life change, like for me, it was when our youngest came along, suddenly I was like, oh man, I do not have the capacity here, and all kinds of stuff started to show up. Therapy isn't like high school. Like, you don't graduate, there's always going to be more things. Do you see it as a drag when those new things show up, or do you see it?
No, I see it as a work in progress.
Yeah.
Not at all. I've always said life is a roller coaster, right? Anything that you take on, whether it's work or whether it's anything. Everything's got its ups and downs, and so does a healing journey as
Mm.
well. And people come to me actually now with this question. Well, I've had 3 good days, and now I've got a crappy day. I don't feel good. Oh, I've gone backwards, or that means I've made no progress. You kind of
Yeah.
feel like every day has to be great, and I've really learned, oh, that's not the case actually.
Mm.
You can have those bad days, and that's absolutely normal. And things are going to happen. Things are going to pop up, even if they don't. Sometimes you're just going to feel lower than other days. And I've learned that, you know what, if today's all I can give is 20%, then I'll give 20%. You know, if all I could do today is just get dressed and, I don't know, brush my teeth, no problem. That's fine. I'll accept that as another day that I'm here, and I'm just going, you know what, I'm going to get through today, survive today, and see what tomorrow brings. So I'm a lot more chill
Mm.
about some of those days that I don't feel maybe my best.
Yeah.
Whereas I used to panic about them, and they used to be, I now know that that's all part of the journey. And I actually really, what I do well now, which I didn't do before because I had no self-worth, any confidence. That's what domestic violence is, unfortunately, the consequences, is I give myself a pat on the back for those good days where I used to before kind of almost go, oh, well, that's normal. No, it's not normal.
Mm.
I now really recognize all the positive things, the good days, and I go, you know, I'm grateful for that. Gratitude has played a massive part in the way that I live my life now. And actually practicing gratitude is massive. I talk about it a bit in Fearless, in my new book, but it's just changed the way that I view things, and the smallest of things that I used to go, whatever. Now I realize just how big they are.
If you're practicing, like everyone knows, they might have seen it, you know, down in the school where they do the kids drop off. There's someone standing there by themselves, and there's a ball machine at the serving machine at the other end of the court, just like bang, 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 and they just like a forehand. For people who've never understood what a gratitude practice is, it might seem like, what? I've just got to sit around and be thankful for stuff. Like how does it change things?
Well, when you've gone through depression, everything's grey. I call it grey. You almost like don't have this power over your thoughts and what's in your head and the way that you see things. And what changed for me is I was always, I feel like, and I'm very grateful for that. For example, I was always humble, and I was always very grateful for the things that I kind of felt like I still had. I never went, oh, poor me, or I went through this. That's what I also didn't want with my story. That was important for me. But I kind of lost a sense of, oh, well, a sunrise, this is very simple, is beautiful to go and watch. I didn't watch a sunrise or a sunset for 12 years while I was battling, you know, depression and mental health, even more. I think the big one as well, maybe it was a bit of an even turning point. My late mother-in-law, she died 4 years ago from cancer, and she was still actually relatively young. She was 67 only.
Wow,
And she went quickly within 7 months.
Oy.
And she was a woman that went through a lot, and I learned a lot actually from her, how to deal with things with grace and dignity. You would never know she went through so much, but she opened her, you know, home to anyone. She was one of the kindest people you can meet. But there was this thing she had. She would wake up every morning at 4 a.m. to have coffee. And I never understood it because also I didn't drink coffee. And it was her, not 30 minutes, it was her. So she would drink coffee, she would write things down. We never knew what she was writing down. No one ever read that. And it was her thoughts. She had a lot of these scrapbooks, right? But it was her 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I just don't get it. And I started to slowly, but then when she passed away, for some reason, as soon as she passed away, I started drinking coffee.
Mm-hmm.
To do with massive work hours of 18 hours on TV and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, it was kind of like, well, she's now gone. I'm going to start drinking coffee almost. And I hated it. I hated it at first. But now I'm like, now I get it.
Mm-hmm.
It was her moment of stop, breathe. I'm alone. I write my things down. Yeah, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm grateful for. She was so grateful for that cup of coffee. I can't tell you. It was like someone gave her, I don't know what. And that was eye-opening for me when she was gone. And I didn't have a person to look at and go, she's doing that.
Mm.
And now I do it every single morning. I did it this morning, waking up at 4 a.m. to catch my flight, just so that I can have my coffee for an hour. I do it every single day, all the time. Doesn't matter if I'm traveling.
You journal in the morning as well?
Yes, I do.
Just what do you do?
I will sometimes reflect on the day before and write. I don't write massive amounts of, like, she used to write a lot more than me. Maybe some of the feelings from the day before, whether they're good things, or maybe some things that are kind of have made me upset, or maybe not. And then I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. So I'll do it every single day. And it might be repetitive. Some days might be the same thing, and that's all right. But I think of 3 things that I'm grateful for every single day. And one thing I do as well when I'm extra tired, because I do work a lot, and sometimes that can get overwhelming when you're fatigued. And then I go, you know what? Grateful tired.
Mm.
Because I'm actually grateful that I even have the opportunity to work that much to
Yeah.
be tired. So I try and find that gratitude in every single thing I do.
When did you start to notice it was working?
I think it was not one particular moment. I would say probably about 3-4 years ago already,
Yeah.
when I started to really focus on the small things. I really went more into like the mindfulness perspective and that kind of healing journey of, okay, what am I about? I don't know whether it's also maybe a little bit of the age thing where I got closer to 40. I'm 41 now, where I kind of went, how do I want to spend the rest of my life? Okay, this is work. Okay, great. What do you want to do in your off time? What do you want to remember when you're, what if I have even less than my mother-in-law? You don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
What do I want to remember? And, when I get to the end of this journey, if I have 2 minutes to think about it, and when I know it's the end, I'm going to remember those coffees.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that sunrise. I'm going to remember that journaling. I'm going to remember spending time with friends. I'm going to remember, every single, because I like it, I like to put that down as gratitude. As every single trip I've taken and the amount of that I travel, because I love it. Those are the moments I want to remember. So practicing gratitude, it's positivity. So, but there's a thing that I actually cover that in my second book. There's a difference though between toxic positivity and a positive mindset.
Tell me about the difference.
So toxic positivity for me, everything's great, or when someone tells you, oh, just get over it, or, it's fine. Like, like everything's great, sunshine and rainbows. No, I don't agree with. Every day it's not sunshine and rainbows, but it's more, having that positive mindset where you go, okay, I'm going to look the best for the best in this bad situation. Okay, it's not great, but what are the solutions, or what is the positive I can take out of it? How can I minimize, let's say, the way I feel or the damage or so on? So it's more looking for solutions. And then also it's those little things where I didn't give myself enough credit for the good things I did, for example. Like, I think you have to be kind to yourself. So I would now go, okay, you know what? Today I did that well. I did that well. I did that well. And I actually don't realize that how much, good I've done. But I always used to focus on the things I did bad. Always. And even towards the end of my tennis career, because I grew up where everything had to be perfect and it still wasn't enough, it can really play with your mind. So I would hit 10 unbelievable shots, which in tennis is a lot. And I would hit one that would be like out by a few centimeters. And I go, everything's crap. But you get into that mindset, and that's also what depression does, right? So I was like, oh my God, that's what I actually do. I don't even recognize, let alone give myself credit for some of these good things, little positive things, or this or that. It's always going to the bad, like you said.
Yeah.
It's always going to the most catastrophic thing.
99 positive Instagram comments and one person whose parents must be called Mr. and Mrs. 165553344 goes, you're a fuckwit. It's
So
like
I was-
everything ends,
So through therapy, we were talking about therapy.
Yeah.
My psychiatrist said to me, you've got anticipatory anxiety.
Right.
So, okay, what's that? Kind of thought I knew what it was, and I was right. But I was like, okay. So I'm anticipating something to happen.
Oh, well, because that's what kept you safe.
And he said,
Yeah.
exactly. But he said, you're always anticipating the worst. You're always anticipating a catastrophe because a lot has happened. So you always go to the bad. You always go to the worst. I had a few years ago, I couldn't fly because I would always, it was done. The plane was crashing. That was it. So I had massive anxiety flying, which I never had. And then I had anxiety going to bed because I thought I would die in my sleep.
Oh, jeebus.
So I had always anticipating this bad thing would happen. So I was actually we were working through that. But there's your always anticipating the worst.
How do you work with that? How do you start to even come close? If people are listening and they go, "Oh yeah, that's me," how do you even begin to address that?
So I think for me it was going, okay, control the controllables. That's what I focused on. So what can I control? I can control the way I react to it. But I can't actually, at the end of the day, in a way, I can't control if the plane's going to go down or not, right? But I also can't anticipate the worst because I don't know what's going to happen. So a lot of it was going, really being kind of in the moment and going, well, just because certain things have gone, the bad way in the past, it doesn't mean they will in the future. So a lot of that was stopping my brain and going, you are catastrophizing.
That's it. Yeah.
Here about something that actually hasn't happened. What are the chances of that happening, right? And even if something does happen, you cannot control that, right? So again, that perfection has led me to go, I want to control everything, but you can't control everything, right? So you got to let go of that. So a lot of that was for me going, not thinking too behind. Can't change that. Not thinking too far ahead. We have no idea what's ahead, and kind of more living in the moment and going, like my psychiatrist said once, okay, I know it can happen, but how many planes are going to take off today and land? Millions, right? How many are going to crash? I know it can happen, but it's, maybe 2 or 3 a year, right? So what are your chances of,
it's pretty slim.
right? So I said, yeah, but it could be. He goes, look, it could be. What if tomorrow I can get hit by a car?
Yeah.
But you can't go and think about what happened or what could happen and always go to the worst. He goes, you can also be great. You might never get hit by a car.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we,
How do you find
go to the worst?
Because what you're describing is probably quite a common response and probably understandable for anyone who's been through anything that looks like what you've been through. Do you have any ways that you can use, or any things that you go to when you're noticing something going on in your body, to get up into that observing mind to go, oh, hang on a second, I'm doing that thing?
I can feel when my anxiety kind of starts to come on and I feel heaviness here. I get quite rattled, like I can't stop moving around and my mind's racing. So I know when that's happening. Even at times my heart rate would go up a bit. But for me, the first thing is I got to get out. So I get out of the house, or if I'm working, I'll get out even for 5 minutes, fresh air, because the first thing that I used to do, and when I was going through depression, anxiety, is close myself in and lock everything, and that's it. So now I do the opposite. And I often find when I go out and when I just give myself a little bit of breathing space, and that really works. Nature for me, has been amazing. And to be honest with you, I'd call a friend first thing as well. You don't need, I always say, you don't need 50 friends. You need one. You need one, and you can do anything. One that believes in you and that will be there for you. That's why I, again, like to reverse it and go, you can be that person for someone.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it can literally save your life.
Oh, yeah. You just need someone who's thinking about the world, not using your brain to think of it. And trust them enough to go, all right, then, I'm going to believe that story, because this story doesn't end very well. So I'm going to believe what they say to me, and then just sit here for about an hour, not write anything, send an email, make a phone call, do anything. I'm not going to book a plane ticket or buy anything. I'm just going to sit here. And then we'll see how
even if someone just calms you down a little bit and listens or is there, it really makes a massive difference. So there are some of those things that I do that I wouldn't have done in the past. I have some post-it notes around my house that are very reassuring about my self-worth and about, just doing well and, just Yeah, I have that on my fridge. I have it in my bathroom as well. Sometimes I have it with me when I travel in my
Yeah.
little notes as well. Yeah, just little things like that help. But if I feel like it's really getting, I'm tired as well, or I'm working a lot, I do have a bit more anxiety than normal, I will go straight away
Yeah.
and see my psychiatrist.
Yeah.
That's very important to talk it out, to talk it through. That happened actually a little bit this month. I've been working a lot as well, and he did tell me I work too much, but
You have the career you
yes,
have because of this
yeah,
work ethic. You have to
but I gotta
balance it.
find it. Yeah, you do have to find a balance.
Yeah.
But for me, it's also straight away going to, okay, I feel like it's realizing and going to, okay, why do I feel like
Mm-hmm.
what caused me? What was that trigger?
Mm.
But then again, I go straight. What I do today is I go to one positive straight
Mm-hmm.
away, one positive from today or one positive from tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Could be the smallest thing. And then I go, it actually, it might sound like a cliche or, oh, that's normal. We do that anyway. No, we don't. I did a little bit of coaching before I got into commentary, just as a backup. I got my coaching degree with tennis, and I coached for a couple of months just to see the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Player to a coach. And you work with junior players, and they hit 6, 7 unbelievable shots, and then they miss one, and then start throwing their racket. I'm going, why are you throwing your racket? You missed one out of. What about the other 6 shots?
Mm-hmm.
And they look at me going, yeah, I don't. They're focusing on this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
That one made everything worse. That one made all the other 6 or 7 bad, right? So that actually made me realize that I did that a lot as well myself. I saw it and it was unbelievable to get out and to see what other person was doing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
What is it? I mean, it sounds to me like a big part of what you want to do from now is to be of service to other people and other people, particularly who've been through something similar to you. What do you get from that?
Look, for me, it's rewarding to be able to know that I potentially help someone. That's what I would like to kind of also the legacy that I leave behind. That was the reason I told my story. That was the reason I wrote my first book and then my second. And I was never my own first priority in it. That's why I said at the end of Unbreakable, if I help one person with telling my story with this book, my it's mission accomplished for me. I had no idea that it would change my life, but I want to be able to be someone that can stand up for a lot of the tough topics, tough conversations and things that are still at times there's shame and stigma when we talk about it. There's labels, there's judgment. I do think we're getting better, but I want to be someone that is known to have a voice and to speak up, but for others. It's not about me, it's about others, especially now
Yeah.
where I kind of even more so feel like this is about everyone else. This is
Yeah, right.
about, maybe that person that will see my social media and my Instagram, which I call it my community. They can see a post or they can see something and it can really help them that day or change their day. Or maybe they will read my book and it will help them, So for me, I feel like I want to be here for others. Maybe give others a bit of that comfort, belonging, feeling like they're not alone, like they're understood. And I think that comes from me not having those things.
Right.
So I now, in a way, want to be able to give that to other people. And I know I can't change the world. It's 8 billion people. I get that. But if I can do that for one person, I would be very happy. So yeah, that's what I am kind of making my mission, my legacy, what I want to be known for. But I also want to be known that, when my journey is at the end, that people go, she told her story and you know what? She told it with kindness.
Yeah.
She never had any blame or hate or resentment towards anyone. And I think it takes quite a bit of work on yourself and power to do that. But I want to show people that you can do that. I want that I stand for kind of those really good core values, but ultimately that I'm speaking up on important issues to try and make a difference.
Blame is such a seductive thing, especially like whenever anything. Your plane was late this morning, right? blame is such an easy thing to want to go to. What happens when we're in blame? What do we deny ourselves?
Will you tell me?
Well, for me, if I'm in blame,
Yeah.
I'm not taking responsibility
Mhm.
for the part that I played in it.
Mhm.
I don't want to see it. And it can even be, well, I chose this airline, I chose this day, I had this unreasonable expectation when I looked at the weather that my plane would leave on time.
Mhm.
That's my
Okay.
part in it,
Mhm.
you know?
I think that I go deeper than that. Like for me, I think that you would absolutely understand people that have been through incredible abuse, or
Mm,
especially I did some work actually, and mentored a couple of women and girls that have been through sexual abuse
mm,
and even rape. And I would absolutely, and I do absolutely understand them
mm,
blaming
mm-hmm,
and feeling that resentment and hate. And I can't imagine
mm,
how they feel. And I still somehow though try to go, but go to the next level.
mm,
And this is unfortunately going to happen to someone. Unfortunately, it happens a lot. But leave that and that kind of bad experience that was filled with violence,
mm,
and let's say hate, and you turn it into something,
mm-hmm,
into you being an amazing person, a survivor,
mm,
a thriver. I like to go off of a motto: victim, survivor, thriver.
mm,
I like to say that about myself. But that's where I go, you can deal with things and you can go through the most horrific things, and you can deal with it with so much kindness and grace and dignity. And it takes a big person to be able to do that. And it's
mm.
not easy.
Yeah.
And like I said, I absolutely understand so many,
Oh, yeah.
victims and survivors, and yeah, it's a horrific thing from what I've also heard from a lot of girls and women that I've
Mm,
spoken to about that. Yeah, and your heart breaks.
mm,
But I always say, you know what, you can change the way that you feel about that. And you're absolutely right to have such horrible feelings. It stays with you forever. But the amazing and beautiful thing that you can do
mm,
is be the opposite
mm.
and be a good, kind person that can actually turn that into maybe something helpful,
And
into
yeah,
helping others, for example. Yeah.
because then you're the one who's making the choices about what it is you do with your life
Mm.
and the way you are to others, rather than a response to someone who doesn't give a shit about you,
Mm.
making the call on how you go through your day.
I also think that it's you take your power back.
Yes, yes, yes.
I think you
That's
take it
it.
back by going, you know what? I'm going to be kind.
Mm,
I'm going to be good.
mm,
I am not going to be anything like that, not even 1% of me.
mm.
And I think that that's how I always kind of go, that's the way to live a, let's say, a happy life,
Yeah,
or with joy, and have those moments of joy and
yeah,
happy days, is to not
yeah,
have hate, resentment, and bitterness.
yeah,
Those are very strong emotions, and I've seen people have them. My father
mm,
was like that. I've seen it firsthand for whatever reason. And I really believe that even the worst of circumstances, by taking that and going, you know what, my power is actually to turn it into something good.
mm,
That's where you do amazing things,
yeah,
and you don't just save your own life that way,
yeah,
but others as well. But you take your power back in a good,
yeah.
in a positive way.
And yes, hurt people hurt people. Yes,
Mm.
I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
And what you're describing is you also get to have this ongoing role of like, and you know what? That shit's going to stop with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not going to let this person
Yeah.
affect anybody else through my
Mm-hmm.
behaviors
Yeah.
that they have. I'm not.
Mm.
That's I'm going to do the world a favor
Mm.
and end that energy here.
And I am actually, you said to me what I want kind of my legacy to be and leave behind, and
Mm,
kind of stand up for others and all that, but you got to be honest. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm the opposite of my father. That what you just said, that I've been able to stop that darkness and being, you know, for whatever reason, being bitter and resentful and having that hate in him as a being and violence and so on. I am, I have to, from a personal level, I would say I'm proud of that. And I could have easily been someone that is very resentful and hates.
Yeah.
I don't. I never want, hate is such a strong feeling and word, but also towards anybody, no matter what. I will always go, you know what? I'll do one better. I'll be good. Because I want to be good, and I think it's the way forward.
I don't know how often people cry when they chat to you, Jelena. I'm guessing it's a bit. Oh, fuck me. You're such an extraordinary human being. And the gift you're given us by choosing to do this is
Thank you.
huge. You could have not done this, but you did. And it's a part of showing that, yes, you know how terrible the thing that happened to me is, and watch. This, it doesn't just have to be me doing this. That's unbelievable.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming around.
Thank you.
I'm glad
Thank
you're
you for
out
the
in the
chat.
world doing the work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
You're changing a lot of people's lives, mate.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
yeah.
it. It's very kind.